What could drive the king of rock and roll to leave everything behind and flee the state after giving his father a shocking demand? Picture the scene. It's late at night, tensions are boiling over, and Elvis Presley, frustrated, defiant, and fed up, delivers a demand that will stun his family and change everything. He looks his father in the eye and tells him to take an action so drastic, so unprecedented, that it shakes the very foundation of Elvis's world. Without waiting for a response, he storms out, disappearing into the night, leaving those closest to him reeling in confusion and fear. What could lead Elvis to such an explosive moment, where even his closest relationships and sense of stability couldn't hold him back? In this video, we'll dive deep into one of Elvis's most dramatic and shocking events. Number 5. Setting the stage. By 1970, Elvis Presley was feeling the crushing weight of his own success and the demands of a career that had spun out of his control. He was, by all accounts, the biggest star in the world, yet the life he led was not his own. From grueling tour schedules to repetitive movie roles that bore little resemblance to the musical legacy he wanted to create, Elvis was locked into an endless cycle that left him feeling creatively stifled and personally trapped. The sparkle of fame had dulled, and what once inspired him now felt like a prison. For years, he had followed orders, complied with contracts, and smiled for the cameras. But inside, he was frustrated, desperate to break free, yet uncertain of how to reclaim the freedom he had lost somewhere along the way. At the heart of Elvis's struggle was his formidable manager, Colonel Tom Parker. Parker was a master strategist who orchestrated Elvis's meteoric rise to fame, crafting the public image that would turn him into an icon. But Parker's influence went far beyond managing tours and deals. He held an iron grip on every decision, dictating which projects Elvis would pursue and even influencing his personal choices. With each passing year, Parker's hold grew stronger, exerting control over aspects of Elvis's life that should have been personal and private. For Parker, every choice had to serve the career machine, even if it meant draining Elvis's passion for his own music. As Parker's control tightened, Elvis felt his own voice slipping away, replaced by the carefully calculated plans of a manager who valued profits over Presley's creative vision. The tension between them escalated in the months leading up to that explosive night. The constant tug-of-war between Elvis's dreams and Parker's rigid management style was tearing him apart. Friends and family watched as Elvis became increasingly vocal about his discontent, questioning the direction of his career and his place in an industry that had slowly worn him down. He was on edge, chafing against the constraints that had once protected him, but now felt more like shackles. Finally, he reached a breaking point, one where the frustration, anger, and resentment collided in a fiery clash that no one saw coming. That night, in a moment of raw intensity, Elvis would say something that would leave his father, his inner circle, and even himself stunned. What he did next was nothing short of shocking, taking everyone by surprise and setting off a chain of events that would change everything. But the real twist was still to come. Number 4, the tipping point. It was a night no one would forget. Elvis stormed into the room, his face set with determination and anger simmering just beneath the surface. His father, Vernon, was taken aback as Elvis unleashed a torrent of words that he had likely held back for years. "God damn it, Daddy! Call him and tell him we're through," he demanded, his voice unwavering, a fierce mix of frustration and defiance. He continued, the intensity of his words echoing in the room. "Tear up the contracts. I'll pay him whatever percentage we owe him." Elvis was done with being a pawn in a game he no longer wanted to play, and this outburst, directed at the very person who had seen him through every success and setback, was the clearest indication yet that he was ready to break free from the life that had been crafted for him. This was more than just an argument. It was a cry for liberation. Elvis, Once the rebellious trailblazer who had taken the world by storm now felt trapped, boxed into a life he couldn't recognize as his own. The projects he took on, the roles he played, the songs he was instructed to sing, all of it felt forced, leaving him with little room to breathe. He openly admitted, "I'm goddamn bored." He was worn down by the monotony, by a career that no longer reflected the passion that had once defined him. For Elvis, this wasn't about fame or money. It was about reclaiming the art that had always been his true love. This explosion of anger and frustration revealed just how fed up he was, how close he had come to losing himself under the weight of Parker's control. Without a second glance, Elvis turned on his heel, his mind made up, and walked out the door, leaving Vernon in stunned silence. The sound of the door slamming reverberated through the house, marking a sudden, shocking exit that would leave everyone wondering what would come next. Elvis didn't say where he was going, didn't look back, and for the first time, he was out there, alone. The king of rock and roll, who was rarely ever without an entourage, bodyguards, or careful arrangements, had simply vanished into the night. It was as if, in that single moment, Elvis had taken back his life, seizing the freedom he'd lost along the way. But what no one knew was that his departure was only the beginning of an unforgettable journey, one that would lead him somewhere unexpected and set the stage for a meeting that would leave fans and the world in utter disbelief. Number 3. Elvis's solo journey. When Elvis stormed out that night, he did something almost unimaginable for a man of his fame and status. He left completely alone. This was the king of rock and roll, a superstar known for his elaborate security detail, assistants, and a carefully managed life where every movement was choreographed by those around him. Yet here he was, without his bodyguards, without a single dollar in his pocket, and shockingly, without even knowing his own phone number. Elvis had always been surrounded, his life guarded and directed to the finest detail. But on this night, none of that mattered. This was raw, unfiltered Elvis, a man who simply wanted to disappear for a while, shedding the expectations and handlers that had been his constant shadow. He wasn't Elvis Presley, the icon. He was just Elvis, a man walking into the unknown. His decision to fly to Washington, D.C. was as unexpected as it was intriguing. He arrived at the airport alone, blending into the crowd in a way he probably hadn't done in years. Boarding a commercial flight, he was driven by a purpose known only to him, a mission that seemed to carry a strange urgency, as though he were on a personal quest. Washington, D.C., with its political power and symbolic weight, seemed an odd choice for the rock legend. Yet something in him was pulling him there, away from the glitz of Hollywood or the comfort of Graceland. This wasn't a vacation, nor was it a spontaneous escape. It was a destination that hinted at something deeper, perhaps even a plan he'd kept hidden from everyone else. As he hopped from city to city, those back home were left in the dark, wondering if he would return or if he was even safe. It was as though he were following some invisible trail, moving further from the life he knew, with each stop adding to the mystery of his sudden departure. For days, Elvis vanished from the radar, leaving everyone to speculate about his whereabouts and his purpose. But whatever he was seeking, whatever drove him across the country, would lead to an encounter that no one saw coming. An encounter that would shock not only those closest to him, but the entire world. Number 2. The shocking twist, the meeting with Nixon. Elvis's unexpected journey across the country ultimately led him to a place no one could have predicted, the Oval Office of the White House, where he found himself face-to-face with President Richard Nixon. In one of the most surreal meetings of the era, the king of rock and roll and the President of the United States shared a moment that would forever be etched into American pop culture history. Elvis, dressed in his signature flamboyant attire with a large belt buckle and rings on his fingers, stepped into the Oval Office, not as a musician or celebrity, but as a man on a mission. He wasn't there to discuss his career or his music. Instead, he came bearing a letter and a deep desire to speak about issues that, to him, went beyond the glitz of Hollywood or the thrill of a sold-out concert. Elvis had a message for Nixon, and he was determined to be heard. As the conversation unfolded, Elvis began to voice his deep concerns over the rising drug culture that was, in his eyes, eroding the moral fabric of American youth. He spoke passionately about the dangers of substance abuse, sharing his fears about the impact it was having on the country he loved. But Elvis didn't stop there. He also expressed a bold and rather unexpected disdain for the Beatles, whom he saw as emblematic of a rebellious spirit that troubled him. For Elvis, fame was a responsibility, and he believed that musicians held a unique power to influence, for better or worse. In his eyes, the Beatles represented a counterculture that conflicted with his own values. He wanted Nixon to understand that his loyalty lay with traditional American ideals, and he was willing to stand against what he saw as harmful influences. Here was Elvis, the rock legend, seeking not admiration but purpose, hoping to use his influence to make a difference beyond the stage. Nixon, sensing the genuine fervor behind Elvis's words, rewarded him in a way that thrilled Elvis beyond measure. The president presented him with a badge from the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, a small yet powerful token that symbolized a shared commitment to fighting the issues Elvis had spoken so passionately about. For Elvis, this wasn't just any badge. It was a symbol of his dedication to a cause he believed in, a validation that he was more than just a performer. He was an ally in a mission. Holding that badge, Elvis felt a surge of pride and purpose, a connection to something larger than himself. It was a moment that blended the worlds of entertainment and politics in a way that had never been seen before, leaving Elvis with a newfound sense of purpose that he would carry with him long after he returned home. Number 1. The Colonel's Return. After his whirlwind journey and unexpected meeting with President Nixon, Elvis returned home to a household that had been left in suspense, hanging on every rumor and wondering when, or if, he would return. His father, Vernon, and those closest to him waited anxiously, unsure of what Elvis had experienced or how he might have changed. But as Elvis settled back into his daily life, the fire that had driven him to walk out and demand Parker's dismissal seemed to have quieted. The heated command to fire his manager, which had set off his escape in the first place, was never brought up again. It was as though the anger and defiance had been temporarily satisfied by his spontaneous journey, leaving everyone around him puzzled, yet relieved. The tension surrounding Parker's influence receded, at least for a time, buried under the familiar routine that would again take over Elvis's life. But this wasn't the end of the story between Elvis and Parker. The control Parker held over Elvis's career and finances was so deeply ingrained that even the king of rock and roll himself struggled to break free. Years later, Elvis would once again reach his breaking point, fed up with Parker's iron grip and unyielding demands. In a moment of frustration, he attempted to sever ties with Parker for good, once again aiming to reclaim control of his own path. Yet, Parker was prepared. He had meticulously orchestrated a financial web that bound Elvis tightly to him. He presented Elvis with an overwhelming bill, an invoice claiming the enormous sum he was allegedly owed for years of services rendered. This financial hold was enough to keep Elvis from taking the final step of ending the partnership, reinforcing the reality that Parker's grip was as much about money as it was about influence. Bound by the weight of financial obligations, Elvis continued under Parker's management, a relationship that would last until the very end, leaving many to wonder what might have been if he had truly been free to follow his own vision. What do you think about this fascinating chapter in Elvis's life? Do you believe he should have broken free from Parker's grip once and for all, or was he right to stick it out despite the control and financial ties? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop your opinions and any insights in the comments below. Let's dive into this story together.